I'm in the retreat hut. There's a slow and irregular pitter-patter of raindrops on the roof. Still half asleep, I rub my eyes, remembering that after meditation last night, I discovered a candle on the altar had melted through its side, allowing wax to drip and spatter silently onto blankets, clothing, a suitcase, a laundry bag, and a metal folding chair. How am I going to remove all of that? Was the question in my mind. I'm slightly preoccupied with the question, but as it's still dark, I sit down to meditate. It'll be easier to survey the extent of the spattering when daylight comes. Also, there is the call to sit. It's the important thing. There is something that calls us here. We answer the call by coming. Sometimes there's an external call, a recommendation, an invitation. Daikan Eno was directed to see Daiman Konin on Obai Mountain. Dogen was recommended to look for a teacher in China to help him find an answer to his question. Reverend Master Jiyu was invited by Koho Zenji to come to Japan. These are the external calls. There is also the inner call, the seed of what brings us here. Prince Gautama was called by an inner sense that he needed to look outside the palace walls, something he needed to see for himself. He answered the call and plumbed the depths of his response. At age 7, Dogen was moved when he saw the smoke rising above the chimney as his mother's cremation took place, and the way-seeking mind was aroused in him. At age 5, Reverend Master Jiyu saw a monastic in the street, and something resonated within her. Arriving in Japan some 33 years later, she realized, in the midst of difficult conditions, that she was desperate to meditate. Sometimes the call is a deafening roar, and each day the call is there, the call to bring us to face the wall. And there is always something that calls us. Some time ago, I was drawn to read the Shurangama Sutra, and then recently in an OBC Journal article, Reverend Master Jisho wrote about it in detail, which inspired me to look further. The sutra begins with a description of the time at the end of a summer training period when the Buddha was about to offer a great teaching eagerly anticipated by the assembly. And on this occasion the king wished to honour the assembly with a feast in memory of his father's death. Ananda is the only disciple missing. He had accepted an invitation to stay out overnight, and then the next day he went out unaccompanied on his alms round. He chanced to pass by a house of courtesans, and there was a young woman who tried to seduce him by chanting a spell. Ananda is on the verge of breaking his vow of celibacy when the Buddha realizes from afar what is happening and sends Manjushri to give him support and also to support the young woman. On his return to the assembly, Ananda bows before the Buddha and weeps in sorrow, regretting what he'd done, seeing that his practice was not fully developed. The sutra continues in the form of a dialogue in which Shakyamuni asks Ananda to explain his understanding of the nature of mind and the senses. Using a traditional system of logic, Shakyamuni patiently dismantles Ananda's propositions. He teaches Ananda and the assembly that mind is not located in our senses, nor is it located in the objects of our senses. He says, "Neither the objects nor the perceptions of them have an essential nature. They are all dependent on each other like intertwining reeds. Know, therefore, that the establishment of perceived objects, such that they exist separately within your awareness, is the foundation of ignorance. Neither the objects nor the perceptions of them have an essential nature. The mind, our ordinary everyday mind of thinking, does not have an essential nature, and neither do the objects that the mind creates." Shakyamuni gives the example of someone pointing a finger at the moon. When we look at the finger, we mistake it for the moon, and also, when we look at the moon, we mistake it for the finger. Neither of them are our true nature, but our attention can wander towards the finger or towards the moon. There is wax that drips. There is the removal of it. A spillage of wax is an innocuous thing. It can happen any time. But when we are drawn to focus on the thing or on the seeing of it, we can create an object of seeing or of mind. So there is separation. We're conscious of the object. We're conscious of the sense of it. This perception in itself is not of the true mind. At some level we know this, as there is separation. So often a level of preoccupation or fear or worry goes with it. The thought of wax becomes an object of mind. The memory of wax becomes an object of mind. As it says in Rules for Meditation, the separation will be as that between heaven and earth, for when the opposites arise, the Buddha mind is lost. In Ananda's case, he was drawn towards what he was hearing. He was drawn towards the object of his senses by the impact on his senses. The Buddha's teaching here is not to be drawn away from our true nature by following the objects of our minds. He uses the analogy of a knotted scarf to describe the way in which our sense faculties, including the faculty of mind, bind together with our senses to create a knot. Shakyamuni tied 6 knots in the scarf, each representing one of the sense faculties. The scarf is our true nature. And when the assembly see the knotted scarf, they no longer see the original scarf. The scarf has changed into something else. It's now the knotted scarf. In order to untie the knots, in order to see with the true mind, we need to redirect our attention inwardly. With each sense, Shakyamuni says, we need to reverse the direction we had been following So instead of following the external objects of our sense faculties, we are returning our attention within to stillness. And when we have done this for one sense faculty, we do it for all of them. He says, extricate one faculty by detaching it from its objects and redirect that faculty inward to what is original and true. Then it will radiate the light of the original understanding. This brilliant light will shine forth and extricate the other 5 faculties until they are completely free. In other words, when sitting in Zazen, we dissolve the separation between mind and object. With the attention inwardly directed towards the still center, there is only this. Often it is these knots that we create in our everyday lives that call us back to meditation. This sense of me and something, mind and object, self and other. He did this. She said that. I like this. I don't like that. These things will arise. Reverend Master Kinray, in his recent article on fear in the same OBC journal, reminds us that we're not going to eradicate these emotions, these things that arise. He says, it is a deeply mistaken view if we think we can live without fear and desire arising. They will always arise, since they are one of the ways we need to relate to the world and the conditions of our life. But the liberation comes from learning not to cling to them, so they can flow through our life like the weather. Turning the light within dissolves the clinging. To see that we separate the objects of our senses and of the mind is to dissolve the clinging. As Dogen says in the Kyoji-Kaimon, the mind and its objects are one. The gateway to enlightenment stands open wide.